Good morning. Good morning. Welcome back to the AREDAY Summit and day number 3. How's everybody doing so far? Got some coffee, a couple of muffins. Great. I'd like to make a little change in the schedule and bring up General Clark. He wants to talk to us for a couple of minutes. He's got a plane he's got to catch, so we're just going to squeeze him in right here at the front end of the program. And Wes, would you like to tell us a little bit about what's on your mind today?
Chip, thanks very much. I wanted to take just 3 or 4 minutes and update you on cellulosic ethanol. Usually I have a nice, long, heated discussion with T. Boone Pickens about natural gas versus ethanol. He's not here this year, at least as far as I know. And you had the oil and gas presentation yesterday afternoon. So the bottom line on this is that cellulosic ethanol is actually making it to the marketplace in quantity. That's the commissioning of this plant in Emmitsburg, Iowa, 3 years ago. This is biomass-driven cellulosic ethanol. This is corn cobs, stalks from corn, leaves from corn plants, and so forth. They've been working on this for 10 years in figuring out how to collect it, how to transport it, how to store it, and how to motivate farmers to take this off their fields. You can take about 25% off the field without hurting the protection for the soil. Next, please. So if you look at this, this looks like big industry, and you'd be right. This is an aerial view of the cellulosic ethanol plant in the foreground, Emmitsburg, Iowa. I was there 3 weeks ago. It's operating. To the left on the center screen, what you see are these rolls of the biomass. They're stacked up there. And then you see the big tanks and the processing. And in the background, you see another set of tanks because this cellulosic ethanol plant is powering the conventional ethanol plant. The cellulosic plant is it's turned out to be about a $350 million investment. And Poet is the company that's done this. Poet is owned by a single man. He was a poor farmer. They put $80,000 to buy a bankrupt ethanol still in Scotland, South Dakota in 1987. This company today is worth billions of dollars, and he personally put the money in to do this and took huge risks to do it. He could never do this if he was on the public marketplace, because when you're doing real technology development, it doesn't follow a quarterly earnings timeline. This is his money. He does the engineering himself. He's about 50 years old. And in the biofuels area, he is Bill Gates or Michael Dell in computing. It's an amazing thing. So basically what they're doing is they're taking the cellulosic ethanol in, they're converting it, the cellulosic material, they're converting it into ethanol. They're using the waste, which is a sticky substance called lignin, and they're burning that in power plants, and that's powering the nearby green ethanol plant. So this is kind of the scale right now. 20 million gallons of cellulosic ethanol per year. They're using 700 tons per day of biomass. It's 560,000 of these big round bales per year. And they take a bale a minute in, and they produce other co-products from it as well. That's just a great scene that's middle America. This is bio-industry. This is what's driven by the effort to get away from reliance on oil. And this is coming to a fight right now in the United States Senate. We're trying to move from E10 to E15 in gasoline. And of course, the oil companies are trying to block this. So there's a waiver required in the 1990 Clean Air Act to enable you to put ethanol in gasoline. So this is going to be a legislative change to the Clean Air Act to enable us to sell E15. This will give us the market demand to roll this technology out across America and move into the cellulosic ethanol age. It's not the end of mankind. It's not the most disruptive technology. It's one step forward to reducing our dependence on petroleum, and this cellulosic is a 100% green fuel. So I want to congratulate my friends at POET and Jeff Broen in particular. I'm going to try to get him here next year. It is a fantastic story of what one businessman with courage and vision can do. Thank you all very much for the opportunity to present.
Brazil has been doing this for probably 30 years, hasn't it?
Scott, say that again.
I said Brazil has been using this in their fuel for about 30 years.
Sure, they're using a different type of ethanol. They're taking sugar. You know, the basic ethanol process is you take a starch and you convert it to a sugar, and then the sugar is fermented to create alcohol. So when you use cane sugar, you don't have to start with the starch. Corn, you start with the starch. The cellulosic material, you start with mostly cellulose. You take the lignin out of it. You're left with starch. You then convert the starch to the sugar. And what's driving this is, what makes it possible is you have to develop new enzymes and new mechanical processes. The mechanical processes are required to sort of chop, steam, acidify, and break down the biomass. And the enzymes are required to take the starch out of the cellulose and then convert the cellulose, the starch, into sugar. And then you've got to have the most efficient yeast material to convert the sugar into alcohol. It's very, very scientific. It's very clean. It's very high tech, and it's moving very rapidly. Yes, sir.
Have they done studies?
I need a mic.
I'm sorry? Have they done studies on the full carbon cost budget accounting from the standpoint of input cost, fossil fuel based? Is it no-till where you're not emitting carbon from the soils? And is it regenerative where they're cover cropping so they're not losing soil during the summer? So there's all of those net equations is what the full carbon cost accounting is in the production of this.
Right. Well, the most of the cost of the carbon is actually in the diesel fuel used for the agriculture. When you do the full carbon cost accounting, that's where most of the carbon comes from. And when you're using the cellulosic as fuel, you're not using any fossil carbon whatsoever for the energy inside. So it's a completely green process, excluding what you have to do to drive the tractor to plant it and so forth. Now, you can run tractors on ethanol, and a lot of these farmers mix ethanol in with their diesel, and it does just great. So they know how to do this thing, and a lot of the carbon accounting it's theoretical, and when you actually get out and look at what these guys are doing, they're being driven by the economics. So they're doing the things that make economic sense, and that they're driving for efficiency, and that efficiency drives down the carbon content. Where this stands right now is that in terms of dollars per gallon, the average grain-based ethanol is coming in around $1.30, $1.40 in cost. 70% of that is driven by the cost of the corn or the milo that goes into it. And we'll probably be able to get cellulosic well below that cost, but it's not there yet because of the cost of the enzymes required to break down the cellulose. So a Dutch company, DSM, is investing millions and millions of dollars to strengthen the enzymes, research on them, mass produce them, and tailor them. This is all sort of bio industry, and this is mostly an American homegrown industry that we've created based on the fuel crisis of 1970. It's kind of an amazing story, and it gets lost in the quibbling over how many calories ethanol produces and blah, blah, blah. Any other questions? In the back. This will be the last question.
Whenever you take material off the land, cellulose, et cetera, you take nutrients as well. You mentioned the 25% number. Is that
Right.
sort of the sweet spot where you don't have to add a whole lot of fertilizer back to grow more crops?
Well, what they're doing is, normally you want cover of the land. There's different types of agriculture. Some people now are doing clover when they harvest, and so there's a a clover crop that's on top of the land after the corn is harvested. But the traditional farming practice is you harvest it with a combine and you leave everything else in the field. The stripped cobs and everything are there. They're plowed under then, and they eventually deteriorate and they feed the soil. You still need to add nitrogen to the soil for corn. And what they've done is the experiments, as I said, it's gone on for over 10 years. You can take about 25% off. It still covers the soil, and it still gives you the same sort of carbon content when you're growing the corn. And that's about the limit. And the farmers are being paid $45 a ton for the biomass. Thank you very much.